And we continue to try to raise awareness before a hearing on Friday about the case of Wendi Traynor. Wendi Traynor was just 25 years old when she was murdered in cold blood by her estranged boyfriend at her apartment in Milton back in 2017. Joshua Ellis, her estranged boyfriend, first went to trial on this back in 2019. He was convicted of murder in the second degree with a firearm enhancement. And he ends up getting 23 years, which I think is kind of low, but it's what they could give him at the time. He ends up getting off on a technicality. They order a second trial. Now prosecutors want to cut a sweetheart deal with him. He's expected to be in court on Friday, 2 days from now. And the family is saying this isn't right. This isn't what we want. We'd rather him go to trial and get the maximum that they can give him. So Anne Bremner is a Seattle area trial attorney, and she has agreed to work with the family to bring awareness to this case. And so she agreed to join us to talk about also not only what the family is dealing with, but her perspective as an attorney, what's going on here. Anne Bremner, welcome to Undivided.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how'd you get involved in this case?
Trent, one of the lawyers that used to be in my firm, who's now on the east side at Inslee Best, who's just a fabulous lawyer. This is a paralegal in their law firm, who's the mother of Wendi. And so her name is Juliana Wong. She's been very involved, but she basically said, this is a travesty. I mean, this man was sentenced to 23 years in prison based on a jury verdict of guilt. And now the prosecutor wants to turn around and cut that more than in half. And so I was asked to come in and talk to the family about what the rights are under the victims' rights laws and under our Constitution. What can they do to protest? What can they do to have input? So that's why I was brought in. And it's been an interesting journey so far toward justice. We just hope that any judge that hears this doesn't accept this quote unquote plea bargain.
Are you doing it for free?
Yeah.
I feel like you do a lot of stuff like this for free, Anne.
I do. And I've got to stop. I mean, it's just like my assistant goes, are you doing this for free again? I'm like, yes. But, it's to have a law degree and be able to use it for good is really a pleasure. So it's something that I'd like to help them with if I can.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that struck me about this case from my perspective, but I'm very curious to hear from your perspective as someone who's been an attorney for such a long time. One of the things is we had in Wendi's aunt, Sherry Jones, and she says the family felt blindsided by this potential plea deal. Is it normal for a family to not be given a heads up about something like that being in the works?
It's a question of timing, Brandi. I mean, they have a right to know what this proposed plea bargain is and have a right, at least have their objections noted in front of a judge. The prosecutor has to bring forward their objections. At what point in the process are they to be informed? In my opinion, it's at the beginning, but there's no definitive rule or law on that, but they have to have input at least and note objections once there's a plea agreement that's reached before it's accepted by a judge.
Does that, in your opinion, have any bearing? I mean, if the defense and the prosecution has said, yep, we're okay with this, do the family's objections really mean anything?
They do. And we have a constitutional rights part dealing with victims. So it's like victims' rights should be similar to defendants' rights. I mean, that was the whole movement. Like all the defendants have all the rights. Victims don't have any rights. And when I say victims, I mean victim families too. So that should have an input. The Epstein case had some of this. I don't know if you remember, but there were victims in Florida who raised an issue and almost went to the Supreme Court, but it was deemed to be moot once he died. But saying we didn't have input when you reached a plea agreement, remember all that with Epstein in Florida before the Southern District federal charges came down. So that's a great example of the court saying, you're right. You do have standing. You had a right to have input, and that was ignored.
Again, from the perspective of an attorney, if you were the prosecutor in this case, I guess, is there anything about the case against Joshua Ellis that would inherently warrant a plea deal? Is there a weakness or something where it would be too risky to go to trial again?
That's the huge question. I mean, that's a brilliant question because I don't see anything. I mean, maybe there's something in the file I'm not aware of. He was tried once. He testified. He admitted to shooting her. He tried to claim self-defense, but he said he would have shot her anyway. So there's no, fatal flaws, so to speak, in the anticipated proof in the case. There was a reversal based upon comments made in voir dire, jury selection, but that shouldn't impact this case at all. It's a clean slate. So there has been some rumor that they've the prosecutors have said it's hard in this environment to get convictions, but that's all I've heard.
And do you mean, I'm just going to be blunt, do you mean because of the races of the people involved?
Potentially, but also the whole issue of police accountability, defund the police when you have police testifying, whether or not they're believed. But I look at Sheriff Troyer, who was my client, and he was believed, he testified, and he was acquitted by a great jury down in Pierce County. So I don't know that I agree with that, but again, I don't practice on a regular basis in Pierce County.
Yeah, it just seems like there's something exceptional here. I mean, here we have what I believe is really a victim of domestic violence, stalked across the country by her estranged boyfriend, shot point blank in the head.
Back of the head.
In the back of the head, left for dead. He allegedly, according to some neighbors, is still visiting the apartment while her body is there decomposing. I mean, so just some egregious elements to this crime. So I guess I'm baffled at the concept of a deal that lets him walk out of prison by 2025.
Yeah, well, we really want to thank you for showcasing this, Brandi. I mean, you're wonderful. And I think I agree with everything you just said. It's not only that, as I understand it, he went out for dinner that night, after he shot her in the back of the head. And he claimed self-defense. How do you claim self-defense when you have you shoot someone in the back of the head? I don't want to taint any potential proceedings or his trial. I mean, ethically, I can't do that, but I can say that I don't see anything in this case that mitigates to the extent that they should offer such a light sentence.
So do you have any hope that between now and Friday, there's going to be some sort of come to Jesus by the prosecution to say, okay, let's not go in this direction? Is that even possible at this point?
Sure, it's possible. I mean, they've reached an agreement with the defense, and it's, I believe, to be in writing. Usually those types of documents, you have to have something reduced to writing when you have a plea agreement. I know that some people have reached out to Mary Robnett, the elected prosecutor, and I don't know if there'd be any change of heart, but I would hope so. I mean, the path of the law has been reason, right? And you just have to be reasonable in all respects, all parties to this case. And I think if people are reasonable, then it should at least be looked at again and anew.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that some people have reached out to the elected prosecutor, and I actually could use your advice on this, and I think our viewers and our listeners could use your advice because, sometimes we have this call to action, like what can people do who are angry or frustrated by this? To me, it's a little more delicate when you have an ongoing criminal proceeding. I don't want people harassing the judge. I don't want anyone to feel pressured or harassed. So is there anything that is appropriate and reasonable that especially citizens of Pierce County can do to voice their opposition to this?
Well, I think it's important to have folks write to the prosecutor or email, voice their concerns. Of course, we don't want to ever have, harassment. And we want to be mindful of the fact that this individual, Mr. Ellis, has a right to a fair trial. That this should not be, his proceedings shouldn't be tainted. What if it does go to trial? What if this does fall apart? I don't want to be a part of it. Nobody wants to be a part of any kind of effort that might jeopardize his rights to a fair and impartial jury and a fair trial. But that having been said, people can certainly say, we understand there's this plea agreement in the works. We'd like to voice our concerns that this is too lenient of a sentence. And we're members of the public. We're part of your jurisdiction, to the prosecutor, and to be basically voicing concerns and also asking if there's anything else that they're not aware of. Because, maybe there's something I'm not aware of, Brandi. I don't know. Maybe there's something that really drove this agreement that I haven't been informed about. But right now, I'm just not aware of anything like that.
Yeah, and us either. We've emailed the prosecutor's office, and they've been pretty close to the vest about this decision making. And I understand that to a certain extent, but we're kind of left just to wonder and even guess, okay, what might be going on here? And let's end with this, just from a broader perspective. You referenced it earlier, but I hear increasing frustration from victims, from families about the state of the criminal justice system, about how they really feel like justice isn't being prioritized. And in a lot of cases, it's almost like criminals not necessarily have more rights, but there's more leniency for them. And it's frustrating for a lot of folks. Are you, from your whole legal career, and you've been in the Seattle area for a long time, are you sensing that as well?
I am, and I've taken a couple of cases over the years where victims and victims' families didn't get redress in the criminal justice system. And so we actually had to go route of a civil case, take the deposition of the person that's the suspect. To basically ferret out what the facts are outside of the criminal justice system. It is really frustrating. to not have a voice or have to hire a lawyer, even if it's for free, to have a voice. It's just, I think, frustrating for families. And I did get a few emails from people saying, how come he has all these rights? We don't, or the family doesn't. And I think that we just have to be vigilant as lawyers in enforcing victims' rights, like in the Epstein case. I mean, those rights were recognized. It doesn't happen very often in terms of like published decisions or noteworthy high-profile cases where victims are heard and they say, we didn't agree to his getting, what was it, a year or something that he got in Florida, and then he could have work release or something, or maybe it was a couple of years, but it was pretty lenient for what was involved.
Yeah, it's not right. It shouldn't be that way. Well, Anne Bremner, thank you so much. And thank you for helping give Wendi Traynor's family a voice. I know that they are so appreciative of what you're doing for them.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate Anne Bremner coming on and obviously lending her expertise to help give Wendi Traynor's family a voice when they feel completely voiceless through this process. So here's what we're going to do based on that conversation with Anne. And again, I think there's a lot of times that we urge you guys to take action, and I think it's been effective in the past. My hesitancy with, for instance, emailing the judge or emailing the prosecutor who's actually trying the case is I don't want it to come across as intimidation, as much as I know that you guys always keep your emails civil. So what we do think is a better thing is to email the politician. I mean, it is an elected prosecutor, Mary Robnett, in Pierce County, and especially if you're a Pierce County resident, you have every right in the world to take issue with something that her office is doing that erodes public safety. So in the comments of the show on YouTube, Facebook, Patreon, Locals, we will be posting a direct link so you can fill out a form that gets sent to the prosecutor's office. It is our understanding that they do receive them directly. It's because Nicole, actually, that's how she ended up trying to reach out to them to get comments on this case, and they responded right away. So I think this is a good way. Keep them civil, but obviously, if you feel compelled, express your disappointment with the fact that Joshua Ellis, given that there is ample evidence that he murdered his estranged girlfriend in cold blood. I mean, we're talking about domestic violence here. I thought that mattered to people in the Wendi Traynor case. Just express how you feel about him potentially getting this plea deal and being out by 2025. So we're going to post that in the comments, so be on the lookout for that.